The clouds slid above the land below, and they were, by and large, indifferent to the laws that people made to govern themselves. Clouds had no interest in right and wrong, in justice and fairness, in process and argument and which word means what. They were too busy rolling over our towns and houses, rolling over Jack's house and Brenda's and Ellie's and Lou's and Beth's. Beth's house was full of fear that morning because Beth was going to court. Beth was not the sort of person who could really understand the things that go on in court. They'd picked up on it at school. She'd been assessed and questioned, and they all decided that she had a learning disability. And it meant she might not pass exams. But did it mean she wasn't supposed to start a family? She didn't know. And even if she did, she would still have had her children. Although the truth was, she struggled with them. She didn't always do the best job of looking after them. She knew she didn't always have the right ideas about it. And now there was crisis after crisis, and the support she needed was too much for anyone to give. Or that's what they said. The court was full of long words and complicated ideas, detailed procedures and coded conversations. We need a placement order. There'll be life story work she can contribute to. And when is the IRH? These things had been explained to Beth once, but not twice, and now she couldn't remember what any of them meant. She listened, but didn't understand so much of what was said. She didn't want people to think less of her by admitting that she couldn't follow things. She just felt that everyone there thought that she was cruel, thought that she was evil, thought that she didn't deserve to be listened to. Beth just couldn't cope at home, but that's not how the barrister from social services made her sound. And now she was about to be faced with people saying that the best thing for her children, who she loved more than anything in the world, was for them to not be with her anymore. She was completely on the outside of a process that would change her life forever, like a cloud floating above it all, unable to speak, unable to change anything, unable to influence the path. Just so scared that her girls were eventually going to forget that she was their mum. Beth needed something extra. People in the court needed to learn to switch between different ways of speaking. They needed to find a balance between the gravitas of what was being decided and the simplicity of communicating it. A balance between looking after someone and not sheltering them from the truth. They needed to learn to slow down, to meet people like Beth before a hearing and introduce themselves, then continue to remind her who they were before they spoke during the proceedings. They needed to use easy-read documents and other tools to help Beth understand things that had been written down about her. Intermediaries, advocates, and social workers should have access to these. Beth needed people to give her the same respect as someone who didn't have a learning disability. She could hear it in the tone of voice, more than the words that were used. She knew when someone was patronising her. People needed to consider how and when they used the word neglect when talking to a parent with a learning disability. Neglect was willful, deliberate, not about the ability to cope. It made Beth feel like she'd let her children down, and it was her fault. But her disability wasn't her fault. People needed to use active listening and to always make sure that Beth understood what was being said, to check that when they spoke for her, they were saying what she wanted them to say. Because how can the right decision be made if Beth cannot understand what is being said? How can things be fair if the people making the decision never take the time to explain things in a way that Beth understands? How can Beth be expected to do what is asked of her if she doesn't understand it? The barrister and solicitor sat with Beth and explained the last goodbye. She would have to do it soon. She would have to let her children go. But because they took the time to sit with her, because they were clear, because they made sure that Beth understood the decision, because they had empathy and explained that they could help her get support, it was not as bad a day as it could have been. Beth understood what was happening and why, and in the years to come, that made all the difference. And the clouds rolled on above all of this, and like all clouds, they were indifferent to events below. But today, even the clouds somehow hoped that not everyone was. Today, even the clouds secretly wanted us to care enough.